Captain Jake Morrison stared at the viewscreen of the UES Liberty as it drifted through the empty space around Kepler 442c. The moon looked like every other dead rock they had surveyed this month, gray and lifeless under the pale light of its distant star. His crew had been mapping the outer rim territories for 6 weeks now, and Jake was starting to wonder if this assignment was punishment for something he had forgotten doing. Lisa Park looked up from her engineering console and wiped sweat from her forehead. The chief engineer had been fighting with the ship's sensors all morning, trying to get clearer readings of the moon's surface. "Captain, I'm getting some weird readings from the northern hemisphere," she said. "There's something big down there, maybe 2 miles under the ice." Ryan Cruz turned from his tactical station with interest. The young officer had joined the crew fresh from the academy and was eager for any kind of action after weeks of boring surveys. "Could be mineral deposits," he suggested. "The Galactic Council pays good money for rare metals." Amy Stone shook her head from the communication station. "The spectral analysis doesn't match any known mineral formations," she said. "Whatever it is, it's definitely artificial." Jake felt his pulse quicken. In over a century of membership in the Galactic Council, humans had discovered exactly 3 alien ruins, and all of them had been picked clean by other species long before humanity reached the stars. Finding something intact would be the discovery of a lifetime. "Take us down to the surface," Jake ordered. "Amy, send a message back to Earth Command. Tell them we might have found something interesting." The Liberty descended through the thin atmosphere and landed near the coordinates Lisa had identified. The away team consisted of Jake, Ryan, and Dr. Nathan Cole, the mission's xenoarchaeologist. They wore full environmental suits as they stepped onto the frozen surface, their boots crunching on ancient ice. Nathan's scanner immediately began beeping. "The structure is massive," he said, his voice crackling through the comm system. "It extends for kilometers in every direction. This isn't just a building, it's an entire complex. They found an entrance hidden beneath a collapsed ice formation. The airlock was clearly alien in design, with smooth curves and materials that seemed to absorb light. When Ryan touched the control panel, it activated automatically, recognizing them as intelligent life forms. The corridors inside were enormous, clearly built for beings much larger than humans. Emergency lighting flickered on as they walked deeper into the facility, powered by some unknown energy source that had survived for thousands of years. The walls were covered with symbols that Nathan photographed frantically, his excitement growing with each new discovery. "This is incredible," Nathan whispered. "The construction techniques, the materials, the preservation level. This facility is at least 50,000 years old, maybe older. I've never seen anything like it." They followed the main corridor for what felt like hours until it opened into a vast chamber. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The room was the size of a sports stadium, and in the center sat a machine that defied description. It was sleek and organic-looking, like it had grown rather than been built. Conduits and cables ran from it in all directions, disappearing into the walls and floor. "What is it?" Ryan asked, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. Nathan was already scanning the device with his equipment. "It's a weapon system," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But not like anything in the Council databases. The energy output potential is off the charts. This thing could destroy entire solar systems." Jake approached the central console where alien symbols glowed softly in the dim light. When he got within a few feet, the symbols began changing, cycling through different patterns, as if the machine was trying to communicate with him. "Captain," Amy's voice crackled through their comm systems from orbit. "We have company. 3 Zephyrian warships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're demanding to know what we're doing here." Jake cursed under his breath. The Zephyrians were one of the 3 major powers in the Galactic Council, and they had a reputation for claiming anything they considered valuable. "Tell them we're conducting a routine survey," he said. "Buy us some time." But even as he spoke, Jake knew it was hopeless. The Zephyrians had advanced sensors, and they would detect the facility within minutes. Sure enough, Amy's voice came back over the comm with bad news. "They know about the structure, Captain. Commander Thane Zaris is ordering us to evacuate immediately." He's claiming salvage rights under council law. Nathan was frantically downloading data from the alien computer system, his hands flying over his portable interface. I need more time, he said. There are terabytes of information here. Technical specifications, historical records, maybe even the builder's identity. How much longer? Jake asked. 10 minutes, maybe 15. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Ryan, help Nathan with the download. I'm going to stall the Zephyrians. He opened a comm channel to the Zephyrian fleet. Commander Xeris, this is Captain Morrison of the UES Liberty. We are conducting scientific research. Under Article 12 of the Council Charter, we request permission to complete our survey. The reply came back in the harsh, guttural language of the Zephyrians, automatically translated by the ship's computer. Human vessel, you will evacuate immediately or be fired upon. This facility now belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Jake looked at Nathan, who was still working frantically at the alien console. Data streams flowed across his screen as the ancient computer systems yielded their secrets. Got it, Nathan finally said. I've downloaded everything I can access from here. They ran back through the corridors as the Zephyrian ships began landing outside. Jake could hear the heavy footsteps of alien soldiers echoing through the facility as they made their way back to the Liberty. The ship lifted off just as the first Zephyrian troops reached the entrance to the underground complex. From orbit, Jake watched as more Zephyrian ships arrived, along with massive construction vessels and scientific equipment. Within hours, the entire area was swarming with activity as the aliens began studying their prize. What did we find down there? Jake asked Nathan as the Liberty jumped to hyperspace. Nathan stared at the data on his screen, his face pale. The builders called themselves the Architects, he said. And that weapon we found. It's called a stellar cascade generator. According to these files, it can trigger chain reactions that destroy entire star systems. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. And now the Zephyrians have it. Maybe, Nathan said. But there's something else. The weapon was never completed. Critical components are missing, and the Architects deliberately sabotaged key systems before they disappeared. The Zephyrians have the hardware, but they don't have the knowledge to make it work. As the Liberty raced toward Earth with its precious cargo of alien data, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed the opening move in a game that could determine the fate of the galaxy. The Zephyrians thought they had claimed the ultimate weapon, but they had no idea what they were really dealing with. And neither, Jake realized, did humanity. But that was about to change. Dr. Helen Carter stood in the center of the Prometheus Research Station's main laboratory, staring at the holographic display that showed the alien data Nathan Cole had recovered from the Architect facility. The information floated in the air, around her like a three-dimensional puzzle, each piece more fascinating and terrifying than the last. General Pete Williams paced behind her, his military bearing evident even in the sterile environment of humanity's most classified research facility. How long before the Zephyrians figure it out? Pete asked for the third time in an hour. Helen turned to face him, pushing a strand of gray hair from her forehead. Based on our analysis of their technology and methods, probably never, she said. They're approaching this like engineers, trying to reverse engineer the hardware without understanding the underlying principles. Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his workstation where he had been studying the weapon's neural interface systems. The Architects were incredibly advanced, he said. This isn't just a weapon, it's a work of art. Every component is designed to work in perfect harmony with every other component. You can't just copy one part and expect it to function. Katie Johnson was bent over a technical schematic, her engineering background allowing her to interpret the alien designs in ways that others couldn't. The power distribution system alone is beyond anything we've ever seen, she said. The Zephyrians are probably trying to hook it up to their standard energy sources, which is like trying to power a starship with a flashlight battery. Tony Lopez turned from his computer terminal, where he had been monitoring intelligence reports from human spies embedded throughout the galaxy. The latest reports confirm what we suspected, he said. The Zephyrians have been working on the weapon for 4 months now, and they haven't been able to even turn it on. Their top scientists are baffled. Helen smiled grimly. Good. That gives us time to understand what we're really dealing with. The data from the architect facility had revealed far more than just the weapon specifications. The aliens who built it had left behind a complete record of their civilization, including their reasons for creating such a devastating weapon and why they had ultimately decided to abandon it. The architects were facing extinction, Marcus said, reading from the translated records. Some kind of galactic threat that we don't have details about. They built the stellar cascade generator as a last resort, but they realized it was too dangerous to use. The weapon doesn't just destroy its target, it can trigger uncontrolled chain reactions that spread across multiple star systems. Katie looked up from her schematics. That's why they sabotaged it before they disappeared. They were terrified of what they had created. Pete stopped pacing and faced the team. So what you're telling me is that the Zephyrians have acquired a weapon that could destroy half the galaxy, but they can't figure out how to use it? Correct, Helen said. But that doesn't mean we should just sit back and hope they never crack the code. We need to understand this technology ourselves, if only to develop countermeasures. What Helen didn't say out loud was what she had been thinking since the first day they received the data. Humanity might be the newest and supposedly weakest member of the Galactic Council, but they had advantages that the older species didn't recognize. Human scientists approached problems differently, combining intuitive leaps with brute force experimentation in ways that often produced unexpected breakthroughs. Over the next several weeks, the team at Prometheus Station worked around the clock to decode the architect technology. They discovered that the weapon's original designers had made several critical errors that limited its effectiveness and made it incredibly dangerous to operate. The neural interface was designed for a single operator, which created bottlenecks in the control systems. The power regulation was unstable, leading to the risk of cascading failures. Most importantly, there were no safety systems to prevent accidental activation. It's like they built a nuclear bomb with a hair trigger, Katie said during one of their daily briefings. No wonder they were afraid to use it. But as the humans studied the alien technology, they began to see possibilities that the original designers had missed. Marcus discovered that the neural interface could be modified to accept input from multiple operators simultaneously, eliminating the bottleneck problem. Katie found ways to stabilize the power systems using human engineering techniques. Tony developed AI protocols that could monitor the weapon's status and prevent accidental activation. We could build a better version, Helen said during a meeting with Pete in his secure office. Not just copy their design, but improve it. Make it safer, more reliable, more precise. Pete leaned back in his chair and studied her face. You're talking about building our own superweapon. I'm talking about building a tool, Helen corrected. The architects saw only destruction, but this technology has other applications. It could be used for precision strikes, defensive barriers, even terraforming. The key is understanding that it's not just about raw power, it's about control. Pete was quiet for a long moment. How long would it take? With our current team and resources, maybe 8 months. The Zephyrians will probably need years to make any progress if they ever do. And you're certain they can't crack it? Helen nodded. Their approach is all wrong. They're trying to force the technology to work with their existing systems instead of adapting their systems to work with the technology. It's like trying to run human software on an alien computer without understanding the operating system. Pete made his decision. Do it. But this stays between us. I'll authorize the resources, but nobody outside this room knows the true nature of the project. The project that became known as Prometheus Fire began in earnest the following week. Helen assembled a team of humanity's best and brightest, telling them only that they were working on advanced defensive systems based on recovered alien technology. The truth was known only to Helen, Pete, and the core research team. Meanwhile, intelligence reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. The Zephyrians were growing increasingly frustrated with their lack of progress. Commander Thane Zaris had threatened his scientific team with execution if they didn't produce results soon. The Helix Collective and the Vorthan Empire were mobilizing. their fleets preparing for the possibility that the Zephyrians would eventually succeed in activating their superweapon. But Tony's intelligence network also brought more encouraging news. The smaller species in the galaxy, including many of humanity's allies, were secretly hoping that the Zephyrians would fail. Nobody wanted to see the galactic balance of power shifted so dramatically in favor of the most aggressive species in the Council. "We're not just building this weapon for humanity," Helen told her team during one of their progress meetings. "We're building it for every species that believes in peace and cooperation over conquest and intimidation." As the months passed, the human version of the architect weapon began to take shape. It was smaller than the original, more elegant in design, and infinitely more sophisticated in its control systems. Instead of a single massive device that could only destroy, the human version was modular and adaptable, capable of being configured for dozens of different applications. The breakthrough came when Marcus successfully tested the multi-operator neural interface. For the first time in 50,000 years, the architect weapon technology responded to conscious control. But instead of the chaotic, barely contained power of the original design, the human version hummed with quiet efficiency. "It works," Marcus said, his voice filled with awe as he watched the test readings scroll across his screen. "It actually works." Katie ran her final engineering checks and nodded with satisfaction. "All systems are stable. Power regulation is within normal parameters. Safety protocols are active and responding." Tony looked up from his monitoring station. "The AI oversight system is functioning perfectly. No risk of accidental activation or cascade failure." Helen smiled as she watched her team celebrate their success. In 8 months, they had accomplished something that the Zephyrians couldn't do in years of trying. They had not only recreated the architect weapon, they had improved it beyond recognition. But the real test was still to come. The asteroid belt installation looked like any other mining facility from the outside, complete with ore processors and cargo haulers moving between the rocks. But hidden inside asteroid M47 was humanity's most classified shipyard, where the UES Defiance was undergoing modifications that would change the balance of galactic power forever. Admiral Susan Blake floated in zero gravity near the ship's main engineering section, watching as teams of technicians carefully installed the Prometheus A fire system into her vessel. The weapon components were sleek and compact, nothing like the massive alien device the Zephyrians were still struggling to understand. Katie Johnson had designed the human version to integrate seamlessly with standard ship systems, making it appear like nothing more than an upgraded sensor array to casual observation. "How much longer?" Susan asked Chief Engineer Ben Cooper, who was overseeing the installation personally. Ben checked his tablet and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Another 6 hours for the primary components, then we need 12 hours for system integration and testing. The neural interface is the tricky part. We've never tried to link something this complex to a ship's main computer." Susan nodded and pushed off toward the command section where Dr. Helen Carter was monitoring the installation from a temporary control room. The physicist looked tired but excited as she tracked the progress on multiple screens showing every aspect of the upgrade. "Any word from our intelligence sources?" Susan asked. Helen pulled up a communication from Tony Lopez. "The Zephyrians are getting desperate," she said. "Commander Thane Zaris has brought in scientists from 3 other species to help with their weapon project, but none of them are making progress either. They're starting to suspect that the device might be permanently damaged." "Good. That should buy us more time." But even as Susan spoke, she knew that time was running out. The galactic situation was becoming more unstable by the day. The Helix Collective had moved their fleets to defensive positions, clearly expecting the Zephyrians to eventually succeed with their superweapon. The Vorthan Empire had recalled their trade ships and closed their borders. Even the smaller species were choosing sides, preparing for what many believed would be the last galactic war. Humanity found itself in an impossible position. As the newest and weakest member of the Galactic Council, they were expected to support one of the major powers, but none of the options were appealing. The Zephyrians were aggressive conquerors who saw humans as barely evolved animals. The Helix Collective treated humans like useful pets, good for manual labor but not much else. The Vorthon Empire simply ignored humanity entirely, considering them too primitive to matter. "What happens when we reveal what we've built?" Susan asked. Helen was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Everything changes," she said finally. "For better or worse, humanity becomes a major player in galactic politics overnight." The installation continued through the night, with teams working in shifts to complete the delicate process of integrating alien technology with human engineering. The neural interface required particularly careful calibration, as it needed to respond to human thought patterns while maintaining the safety protocols that prevented accidental activation. Marcus Webb had spent weeks training the operators who would control the weapon system. Unlike the Architect original, which required a single operator to manage all functions, the human version distributed control among multiple specialists. The weapons officer controlled targeting and power levels, the navigator managed spatial calculations, and the captain retained ultimate authority over activation. "It's like conducting an orchestra," Marcus explained to the crew during a training session. "Everyone has their part to play, but they have to work together to create harmony." The first full system test took place 36 hours later, with the Defiance positioned deep in the asteroid field where sensor interference would hide any unusual energy signatures. Susan sat in the captain's chair while her crew took their positions at the modified control stations. "All stations report ready," called out Lieutenant Dave Martinez from the weapons station. "Navigation computers are synced with the targeting system," reported Ensign Carol Stevens from her position. "Neural interface is active and responding normally," confirmed Dr. Marcus Webb from the science station. Susan took a deep breath. "Begin low-power test sequence." The ship hummed with barely audible vibrations as the Prometheus fire system came online for the first time. Energy readings spiked momentarily before settling into stable patterns. The main view screen showed a targeting display unlike anything in the human fleet, with layers of information flowing across multiple dimensions. "Target asteroid designated Alpha 7, Susan ordered. "Target acquired," Dave responded. "Recommend power setting 2% for structural disruption. Navigation confirms clear firing solution," Carol added. Susan felt the neural interface responding to her thoughts, waiting for her command. The sensation was strange, but not unpleasant, like having a conversation with the ship itself. Fire. A pulse of energy, invisible to the naked eye, reached out from the Defiance and touched the designated asteroid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the massive rock began to glow from within. Sections of it shifted and reformed, restructuring themselves according to patterns programmed into the weapon system. "Incredible," breathed Chief Engineer Ben Cooper. "The asteroid is being transformed at the molecular level. We could turn it into a space station, or break it down into component elements, or even just move it to a different orbit." The test was a complete success, but it also revealed the true scope of what they had created. The Prometheus fire system wasn't just a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a tool for reshaping reality itself, limited only by the imagination and skill of its operators. Over the following weeks, the crew conducted dozens of additional tests, exploring the system's capabilities under different conditions. They learned to create defensive barriers that could stop incoming projectiles, to repair damaged ship components by restructuring their atomic bonds, and to generate energy fields that could disable enemy weapons without harming the crews that operated them. But the most impressive demonstration came during a combat simulation against drone targets. Instead of simply destroying the attacking vessels, the Defiance's crew used the weapon system to reprogram their navigation computers, turning the enemy drones against each other while leaving their AI cores intact for later study. "We could end space battles without casualties," Susan realized. "Disable enemy ships, rescue their crews, and send them home with a message about human capabilities." Helen nodded from her observer position on the bridge. "That's what makes this technology truly revolutionary. The architects saw it only as a tool for destruction, but we've turned it into an instrument of precision and mercy." The upgrades were completed just as intelligence reports began arriving about increased activity in the Zephyrian territories. Commander Thane Zaris was preparing to move his fleet to a neutral system, apparently planning to test his superweapon, whether it was ready or not. He's getting pressure from his superiors, Tony Lopez reported during a secure communication from Earth. The Zephyrian High Command is demanding results, and Zaris knows his career is over if he can't deliver. He's going to try activating the weapon regardless of whether his scientists think it will work. Susan looked at her crew, all of them now trained in the operation of humanity's secret weapon. They had gone from being the crew of a standard exploration vessel to the operators of the most advanced technology in the galaxy. But she knew that their real test was yet to come. How long before the Zephyrians make their move? She asked. Intelligence. Suggest within the next few days, Helen replied. They've issued ultimatums to the other major powers demanding territorial concessions. If those demands aren't met, Zaris plans to demonstrate his weapon in the Sigma Draconis system. Susan felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity had built something incredible, but now they had to decide how to use it. The easy choice would be to stay hidden, to let the other species fight among themselves while humans remained safely neutral. But Susan knew that wasn't really an option. If the galactic powers tore each other apart, humanity would eventually be caught in the devastation. Set course for Sigma Draconis, she ordered. It's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. As the Defiance left its hidden base and headed toward what might become the most important battle in galactic history, Susan couldn't help but think about how far humanity had come. Less than a year ago, they had been dismissed as primitive upstarts barely worthy of their seat on the Galactic Council. Now they possessed technology that could reshape the balance of power among the stars. But with great power came great responsibility, and Susan knew that how they chose to reveal their capabilities would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of every species in the galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Council took place aboard the massive space station that served as the government's mobile headquarters. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great assembly hall, but all eyes were focused on the three major powers whose fleets now faced each other across the Sigma Draconis system. Ambassador Carol Price sat in the human delegation's modest section, dwarfed by the impressive displays of the more powerful species. The Zephyrian delegation occupied a raised platform decorated with trophies from their conquests, while the Helix Collective's representatives appeared via hologram from their advanced command ships. The ancient Vorthon Empire's ambassadors wore ceremonial robes that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Commander Thane Zaris himself addressed the assembly, his harsh voice echoing through the translation systems. The Zephyrian Empire has acquired technology that will ensure galactic stability under our leadership, he declared. We demand immediate recognition of our expanded territorial claims and the submission of all military fleets to Zephyrian command. The Helix Collective's response was delivered by their AI spokesperson, a perfectly synthesized voice that carried no emotion. The collective rejects these demands. Our analysis indicates a 73% probability that Zephyrian claims regarding advanced weaponry are exaggerated or false. The Vorthon representative, an elderly being whose species had ruled much of the galaxy when humans were still living in caves, simply stated, "The Empire recognizes no authority above our own." Carol stood to address the assembly, knowing that her words would likely be ignored but feeling compelled to speak anyway. The human delegation calls for peaceful negotiation and scientific verification of any claims regarding new weapons technology, she said. Surely we can resolve these disputes without resorting to violence. The Zephyrian commander's response was predictable. Humans have no voice in matters concerning real powers. Return to your primitive worlds and let your betters decide the galaxy's future. But even as the diplomatic charade played out in the council chambers, the real drama was unfolding in the Sigma Draconis system itself. Admiral Susan Blake watched from the bridge of the UES Defiance as thousands of warships took positions throughout the star system. The Zephyrian fleet controlled the inner planets, their massive dreadnoughts arranged in battle formations that had conquered dozens of worlds. The Helix Collective's ships hung in perfect geometric patterns, their automated systems calculating firing solutions and defensive strategies with mechanical precision. The Vorthan Empire's ancient vessels moved, with stately grace, their weapon systems charged with energies that could crack planets. "What's our status?" Susan asked her crew. Lieutenant Dave Martinez checked his displays. "All major fleets are maintaining battle positions. No weapons fired yet, but tension is increasing by the hour. The Zephyrians have positioned their flagship near the coordinates where they plan to test their superweapon. Any sign they've figured out how to activate it?" Dr. Marcus Webb shook his head from the science station. "Intelligence reports suggest they're still having problems, but Commander Zaris seems determined to try anyway, whether it works or not." Susan understood the Zephyrian commander's desperation. He had staked his career and his species' reputation on the alien weapon, and backing down now would mean admitting failure to his superiors. Better to risk everything on a desperate gamble than face certain disgrace. The human fleet's contribution to the crisis was modest by galactic standards. Earth had sent 12 ships to the Sigma Draconis system, officially, as part of the Galactic Council's peacekeeping force, but really because they had no choice. The major powers expected even minor species to choose sides in the coming conflict. What none of the alien fleets realized was that the UES Defiance, appearing to be just another human cruiser, carried technology that made all of their mighty warships obsolete. The deadline passed with diplomatic protests and counter-protests, but no real progress toward peace. Commander Zaris finally lost patience and issued his final ultimatum. "In 1 hour, the Zephyrian Empire will demonstrate our new weapon's power," he announced on all frequencies. "Any ships remaining in the target zone will be destroyed along with the test target." The target was a lifeless planet on the system's edge, selected because its destruction wouldn't affect inhabited worlds. But everyone knew that if the Zephyrian superweapon worked, it would only be a matter of time before they turned it against their enemies. The hour countdown began with frantic diplomatic activity as smaller species tried desperately to prevent what could become the galaxy's final war. But the major powers were committed to their collision course, and nothing short of a miracle could stop them now. With 30 minutes left on the countdown, the first shots were fired. A Helix collective patrol ship strayed too close to a Zephyrian formation and was fired upon without warning. The automated vessel responded by targeting the nearest Zephyrian cruiser, beginning an escalating series of skirmishes that spread throughout the system. "All fleets are engaging," reported Ensign Carol Stevens from her navigation station. "Casualties mounting on all sides." Susan watched the tactical display as thousands of ships began the largest space battle in recorded history. Energy beams lanced between formations while missiles streaked across millions of kilometers. The beautiful mathematical precision of the fleet formations dissolved into chaos as ships maneuvered desperately to avoid destruction while seeking clear shots at their enemies. "Admiral," called Chief Engineer Ben Cooper over the intercom. "We're receiving authorization codes from Earth Command." Susan felt her heart rate increase. The authorization codes meant that General Pete Williams and Dr. Helen Carter had decided it was time to reveal humanity's secret. "Confirm authentication and stand by for activation sequence." The battle raged around them as the Defiance moved slowly toward the center of the conflict. To the alien fleets, the human ship seemed insignificant, just another minor player trying to survive in a battle between giants. Several enemy vessels targeted the Defiance, but were forced to break off their attacks to deal with more immediate threats. With 5 minutes left on the Zephyrian countdown, Commander Zaris made his move. His flagship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons, moved toward the test planet and began powering up the alien superweapon. Energy readings spiked as the Zephyrian scientists made their final attempt to activate the architect device. "They're going to try it," Marcus reported. "Whether it works or not, they're committed now." Susan opened a fleet-wide communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake of the UES Defiance. Stand by for immediate weapons shutdown in 60 seconds. The alien commanders who heard the transmission probably thought she was having a mental breakdown. A single human cruiser threatening to shut down thousands of warships from multiple species was beyond ridiculous. But Susan had seen the test results from their hidden asteroid base. She knew exactly what the Prometheus fire system could do. "All stations report ready," she announced to her crew. "Targeting systems locked on all weapons in the combat zone," Dave confirmed. Navigation computers have calculated firing solutions. For maximum coverage, Carol added. Neural interface is online and responding, Marcus reported. Susan felt the familiar sensation of the weapon system connecting to her thoughts, waiting for her command. Through the neural link, she could sense the positions and capabilities of every ship in the battle zone. The Prometheus fire system had mapped their weapons, their shields, their life support systems, and their crew compartments with perfect precision. The Zephyrian superweapon reached critical power levels and fired, sending a pulse of energy toward the target planet. For a moment, it seemed like Commander Zaris had succeeded. The planet's surface began to glow with destructive energy. Then the alien weapon overloaded catastrophically, destroying itself and taking half of the Zephyrian flagship with it. The explosion was visible across 3 star systems but caused no other damage. The failure sent shockwaves through both fleets. The Zephyrians had staked everything on their superweapon, and now it was gone. But instead of ending the battle, the weapon's destruction only made the fighting more desperate. As thousands of ships continued their deadly dance, Susan made her decision. Fire. The pulse from the UES Defiance was invisible to the naked eye, but its effects were immediately obvious to every ship in the Sigma Draconis system. In the space of a single heartbeat, 10,000 warships found their weapon systems completely disabled while everything else remained perfectly functional. Commander Thane Zaris stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His ship's engines worked fine, life support was normal, and communications were clear. But every single weapon on his massive dreadnought had simply stopped functioning. Around him, his crew ran diagnostics and tried to restart systems that showed no signs of damage but refused to operate. The same scene played out across the battlefield. Helix Collective ships found their precisely calibrated weapon arrays dark and silent. Fourth and Empire vessels discovered that their ancient but powerful energy cannons would not respond to any commands. Smaller ships from dozens of species all reported the same impossible situation. Admiral Susan Blake opened a fleet-wide communication channel from the bridge of the Defiance. All vessels, this is Admiral Blake of the United Earth Ship Defiance. Your weapons have been temporarily disabled to prevent further casualties. I repeat, your weapons are offline but will be restored once this conflict is resolved peacefully. The response was immediate chaos. Hundreds of alien commanders tried to speak at once, demanding explanations and making threats. But their anger turned to amazement as the Defiance demonstrated the full scope of its capabilities. Lieutenant Dave Martinez worked smoothly at his weapons station, using the Prometheus fire system with the precision of a surgeon. Initiating debris cleanup protocol, he announced. The weapons system reached out across the battle zone and began collecting the wreckage of ships destroyed in the fighting. Twisted metal straightened itself, hull breaches sealed, and scattered components flew back together. Within minutes, dozens of vessels that had been floating dead in space were restored to perfect condition, their crews alive and unharmed. Impossible, whispered Dr. Vex Corian, the Zephyrian scientist who had spent months trying to activate the architect weapon. No technology in the galaxy can do what we just witnessed. But Susan was just getting started. She ordered Ensign Carol Stevens to target the lifeless planet that had been designated for the Zephyrian weapon test. Begin terraforming sequence. The Prometheus fire system focused its energies on the dead world, and the planet began to change. Atmospheric processors emerged from the reformed surface. Clouds gathered in the previously empty sky, and vast oceans began filling newly carved basins. In the span of an hour, a barren rock became a garden world capable of supporting billions of lives. The alien fleets watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated technology that was beyond their wildest dreams. This wasn't just advanced weaponry, it was the power to reshape reality itself. Commander Zaris finally found his voice. "What are you?" he transmitted to the Defiance. Susan smiled as she prepared to answer a question that would change galactic history. "We are human," she said simply, "and we've been working on some improvements." Dr. Helen Carter's voice joined the conversation from Earth, her transmission reaching every ship in the system. The weapon you discovered, Commander Xeris, was built by a species called the Architects over 50,000 years ago. They abandoned it because they realized it was too dangerous to use safely. Humanity recovered the technical specifications during your salvage operation, continued General Pete Williams. While you spent months trying to make the original design work, we built something better. The implications hit the alien commanders like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just copied the Architect weapon. They had improved it beyond recognition, and they had done it in secret while the galaxy's major powers were focused on their territorial disputes. Why reveal this now? Asked the synthetic voice of the Helix Collective's AI command system. Susan answered that question personally. Because the galaxy is better when we work together instead of fighting each other. This technology could revolutionize interstellar civilization, but only if we use it responsibly. To demonstrate her point, she ordered her crew to begin repairing damaged ships from all fleets simultaneously. The Prometheus fire system reached out with gentle precision, healing battle damage and restoring disabled vessels to full operational status. Zephyrian, Helix, and Vorthan ships all received the same careful treatment, their crews watching in amazement as their vessels were restored to better than new condition. Our species has always believed that the greatest weapon is the one you never have to use, Susan continued. We built this system not to conquer or destroy, but to protect and preserve life throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Carol Price took over the diplomatic aspects of the revelation from her position aboard the Council station. Humanity proposes a new framework for galactic cooperation, she announced. Instead of competing for dominance, we could work together to explore the remaining Architect sites and unlock technologies that benefit everyone. The response from the major powers was mixed but encouraging. The Helix Collective's AI systems immediately began calculating the benefits of technological cooperation with humanity. The Vorthan Empire's ancient leaders recognized wisdom when they saw it, having survived for millennia by adapting to changing circumstances. The Zephyrians were the most resistant, as expected. Commander Xeris had built his career on military conquest, and the idea of peaceful cooperation went against everything his species believed. But even he couldn't ignore the reality of what humanity had accomplished. You could have destroyed us all, he transmitted to the Defiance. Why didn't you? Susan's answer was simple but profound. Because destroying you wouldn't have solved anything. The galaxy has room for all of us if we're willing to share it. Over the following hours, the immediate crisis was resolved through a series of negotiations that would have been impossible before humanity's revelation. The threat of mutual destruction had been replaced by the promise of mutual benefit, and even the most warlike species could see the advantages of cooperation over conflict. Dr. Nathan Cole arrived in the system aboard a research vessel, along with teams of scientists from Earth and several allied species. He immediately began sharing the Architect historical records with researchers from other civilizations, revealing the scope of the ancient civilization's achievements and the locations of additional sites waiting to be explored. There are at least 50 more Architect facilities scattered throughout the galaxy, Nathan announced during a joint scientific briefing. Each one contains technologies and knowledge that could advance all of our civilizations by centuries. The transformation of galactic politics was remarkably swift. Species that had been preparing for war suddenly found themselves planning joint research expeditions. The Prometheus fire technology, shared freely by humanity with appropriate safeguards, began revolutionizing everything from planetary defense to deep space exploration. Captain Jake Morrison, whose discovery had started the entire chain of events, found himself commanding a joint expedition fleet that included ships from a dozen species. The UES Liberty had been upgraded with human versions of Architect technology, making it one of the most advanced exploration vessels in the galaxy. It's amazing how quickly everything changed, Jake told his crew as they prepared to investigate another Architect site. A year ago, we were barely tolerated members of the Council. Now we're leading the most important scientific mission in galactic history. Lisa Park looked up from her upgraded engineering console. It just goes to show that sometimes the best way to win is to help everyone else win too. The new galactic order wasn't perfect. There were still disputes and disagreements, and some species remained suspicious of humanity's rapid rise to prominence. But the fundamental dynamic had changed from competition to cooperation, from fear to hope. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the bridge of the Defiance as her ship patrolled the space lanes that had been battlefields just months before. Trade ships from dozens of species now traveled freely through regions that had been contested territories, protected by joint defense fleets using technology that made war between civilized species effectively impossible. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Dave Martinez from his station, "we're receiving a distress call from the Outer Rim. A colony ship has suffered engine failure and needs assistance." Susan smiled as she gave the order that had become routine in the new galaxy. "Set course to render aid, maximum speed." The Defiance accelerated toward the stranded vessel, its Prometheus fire system already analyzing the ship's problems and preparing solutions. In the old galaxy, a disabled ship might have been ignored or even attacked by opportunistic raiders. In the new galaxy, help was always on the way. Humanity had found their place among the stars not through conquest or intimidation, but by proving that the greatest strength was the wisdom to lift others up. They had taken a weapon of ultimate destruction and transformed it into a tool of ultimate creation, showing the galaxy that there was always a better way forward. The architects had built their superweapon in fear and desperation, then abandoned it because they couldn't control it safely. Humanity had taken that same technology and made it into something that protected rather than destroyed, that created rather than consumed.